Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Demitria Kirby, the Youth Services Manager for the City of Keene. Through my role, I work collaboratively with area agencies to provide intervention services for youth, as well as educational opportunities for caregivers and community members. I also serve as the coordinator for the Juvenile Court Diversion program, which serves youth throughout Cheshire County. I have been with the city for close to 2 years now. However, I have been an active member of the Keene community for several years. And prior to my current position, I worked with crisis centers, child protective services, and child advocacy centers. I am also a 2012 graduate of Keene State College. I am joined here today by a longtime dedicated committee member, Erika Greenwald, as well as a young woman who participated in our program a few years ago. I'll begin by providing a brief overview of our program, the Restorative Justice movement, and how the two worlds collide, and then invite Ricky and Bailey to share their experiences. I want to preface this discussion by saying I am certainly not an expert on the subject, but I can happily discuss the benefits of the restorative justice approach that we see in our work with youth. We will also provide ample opportunity for question and answer following the presentation. So to begin, what is juvenile court diversion? So the local juvenile court diversion program, also known as the Juvenile Conference Committee or JCC, originated in the 1970s through the New Hampshire State Probation Department. It was designed to be a pre-court diversion program for youthful offenders, and all members of the program were volunteers. As both referrals and caseloads increased, the City of Keene received funding in 1977 to create a paid coordinator position. This position would work closely with a team of volunteers to provide direct service to youth participants, as well as other services such as case management, program oversight, and up-to-date record keeping. Since then, the program has been funded for many years through the City of Keene and Cheshire County. Currently, the JCC is comprised of 6 volunteers from a variety of backgrounds, including but not limited to mental health, community support agencies, education, peer recovery support, and crisis advocacy. The program remains a pre-court diversion program in which youth are referred by law enforcement or courts prior to receiving a formal charge on their record. If youth are able to successfully complete the program, they do not have to attend a court hearing, and the pending charge or charges will be dismissed. Although the program is designed to be attended in lieu of formal court proceedings, it was actually very similar to court in the beginning. The panel of volunteers would sit on one side of the table and ask the youth very directed questions about the event that led to their referral to the program. It provided very minimal opportunity for the youth in terms of collaboration or interaction. However, since then, the program has evolved to incorporate restorative justice principles, which have shown to be extremely beneficial for the youth participants. So what is restorative justice? While the modern movement of restorative justice began around 1970, it is built upon indigenous practices from long ago. Howard Zehr, who is often credited as the grandfather of the modern movement, defines it as a process to involve, to the extent possible, those who have had a stake in an offense, and to collectively identify and address harms, needs, and obligations in order to heal and put things as right as possible. So as you can see in this quote, restorative justice is very process-oriented versus focusing solely on a goal or an end result. Restorative justice is built upon the following understandings. Crime or wrongdoing is a violation of people and of interpersonal relationships. A law may have also been broken, but the primary harm was to another person or to the community at large. Restorative justice suggests that we are all interconnected, and therefore a harm to one of us is a harm to all of us. Also, violations create harms, needs, and obligations. So crime creates an upset in the balance or social contract of living together peacefully and respectfully. Some examples of needs that can be created are the need for information. Why did it happen? How did it happen? What has happened since then? Harm parties sometimes need the opportunity to share their truth and how the event impacted them. Harm parties may also need the opportunity for empowerment, as sometimes these situations may make them feel a loss of control. And there may also be a need for restitution or vindication, whether that be symbolically or through monetary repayment of damages or loss. The central obligation is to put right the wrongs or to repair the harms caused by wrongdoing. This is done by involving stakeholders or those most affected by the harms in a meaningful and empowering way. So to summarize, what we see here is the 3 pillars of restorative justice. Harms and needs, obligations, and engagement. And for justice to be served, for the engagement piece, all stakeholders should be invited to participate. When speaking about restorative justice, we also like to talk about what it's not. So it's not centered on forgiveness or reconciliation. Although the process can create an opportunity for reconciliation, it is not the primary focus. Harmed parties are not required to forgive, nor is it expected, as it creates an unfair burden. It's not mediation, although it is a facilitated discussion. Restorative justice is not mediation. Mediation implies that both parties are on equal moral footing, whereas in restorative justice, one party has harmed another and is taking accountability for that. It is not a specific model or blueprint. In order to be successful, programs practicing restorative justice should really tailor their programs to the needs of the community, to the culture, and to the stakeholders involved. It's not a map, but a compass or a guide. It is not a replacement for the legal system, as it's not appropriate for every case. That being said, restorative justice can work within the legal system and serve as an alternative to formal court proceedings or charges, as it does with our program. Restorative justice is not the easy way out. Responsible parties have to accept accountability for their actions and be willing to make amends. This requires a level of insight and introspection that many youth struggle with, and we often work with them on this through their participation in the program. I also like to show this slide as it really compares traditional criminal justice with restorative justice. So as we can see here, traditional criminal justice focuses on the laws that were broken, whereas as we've discussed, restorative justice really focuses on the people and the relationships that were harmed. Traditional justice says that crime is an individual act with an individual responsibility. Restorative justice certainly focuses on the individual, but it also focuses on the community and the society elements as well. The term justice in traditional justice focuses on establishing guilt, whereas in restorative justice, again, it's about identifying needs that were created and obligations and responsibilities in meeting those needs. Accountability with traditional justice is about punishment, whereas in restorative justice, it's about understanding the impact of one's actions, even unintended impacts, and repairing harms. Traditional justice uses terminology such as victims, and the victims are often kept peripheral to court proceedings. There are sometimes that we see this in court orders where it will be responsible party versus the state, rather than involving the victim. Restorative justice tries to use harmed party rather than victim, and they're very central to the process as our stakeholders and community members. Traditional justice uses the term offender, and offenders are often defined by what they lack or what flaws they're perceived in having. Whereas in restorative justice, we use the term responsible party, and they're defined by their capacity for repairing the harm and preventing future harms. Traditional justice focuses on the past, establishing guilt, really picking apart what's already happened. Whereas restorative justice focuses on the future, what can be done from here and who is responsible for that. How do we incorporate restorative justice into our work with youth? First, we try to be very aware of our terminology. Certainly we make mistakes, but we try very hard to be careful what words we're using. So we try to use responsible party rather than using offender. We try to use harmed party rather than victim. We try to say event that led to your referral rather than saying the crime or the offense. We say meeting with the committee rather than a hearing as it was previously labeled. There are just some negative connotations that can be associated with the other terminology. So we try very hard to be aware of what terms we're using in our work with youth. Accountability is certainly a requirement for participation in the program, as it's really central to the restorative justice process. So oftentimes youth do struggle with accountability at the onset, but as time goes on, it typically does improve. We have had situations where a youth is not willing to admit to their role in the events or says that they'll do the work, they'll do the program, but they didn't do the offense that was listed in the police report or the referral that was received. In those cases, we typically ask youth to take a day or two and really reflect on it. And then get back to us. If they absolutely refuse to accept any level of accountability, we're really unable to work with them. And unfortunately, we have to refer them back to the police department and or court. Once a youth is accepted into the program, they must complete a contract of assigned tasks and behaviors in order to successfully complete the program and avoid a return to the police department and court action. As previously mentioned, restorative justice is not a specific model or blueprint, and therefore each case is handled very differently depending on the needs of the youth, the harm party, and the stakeholders involved. The contract is created collaboratively, and which again kind of reinforces the idea of engagement and participation, one of those pillars we had discussed earlier. We often look beyond the immediate action to try to address the source of the behaviors. So what are the youth's needs? Do the youth need help with decision making? Was peer influence a factor? Do they struggle with anger management? Were they under the influence when this happened? Sometimes we have to look at, does a referral need to be made to an outside agency to provide long-term supports to the youth or family? We will ask youth to identify who has been harmed and how. We discuss the ripple effect of one's actions beyond those who were immediately or directly impacted, including effects that were unintentional. We look for harm party participation when in agreement and when appropriate. When a referral is received, a letter and a brochure are sent to the identified harmed party. These documents introduce the program, discuss the benefits of restorative justice, and invite the party to participate to the level they are most comfortable with. They are also provided with a victim impact statement that they are welcome to complete and return, which will be read to the youth at the next meeting. We've also had harm parties who are willing to meet with the youth in person or talk with them over the phone in order to share their story and to ask questions. We do also welcome stakeholder participation. So typically that's the Juvenile Conference Committee, youth, caregivers, police departments, schools, or other agencies. If there is an outside agency involved with the family, we have invited them to participate in the past with the family's agreement. This provides additional support to the youth, but it also brings another perspective to the table and helps the team identify other needs they may not have been aware of otherwise. We also ask youth to tell us more about themselves, what's something they consider a strength or something they're proud of, something they want to work on. This not only helps us get to know the youth and identify strengths and needs, but facilitates an open conversation to assist the youth in seeing that we aren't judging them or defining them solely by the event. Contracts work on skill building and can be very future focused in that way. So we also work with youth on identifying goals and concrete steps that can be taken to achieve those goals. So for example, we've had youth work on vision boards where they identify both immediate and long-term goals. We then discuss with them what steps can be taken to achieve those goals. Goals can be educational, personal, professional. We also discuss with them the impact that a formal charge could have on those plans if they were to commit another offense or to not successfully complete the program. So just some examples of what a contract may contain. So youth may be asked to participate in online coursework to address a root cause of the referral. The program has secured grant funding in order to be able to provide evidence-based online coursework on anger management, alcohol education, decision-making skills, marijuana or THC awareness, theft intervention, nicotine and tobacco awareness. And these classes range anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 hours. We sometimes ask youth to complete a research project related to the pending charge. So what would happen if they went to court? What would happen if they were 18 and charged? How would that impact their future opportunities? We've also had youth do research projects that are more community focused, such as the impact of shoplifting on small businesses or the impacts of graffiti on a community. Many youth report to us that they weren't thinking or that things happened all at once. So to assist them on understanding the events a little further, we do ask them to complete decision-making worksheets that help them break down the series of events that led to the referral and understand the various points that another decision may have been made to avoid the ultimate outcome. This can be a difficult task for many youth as it requires introspection into their role in the event that occurred, as well as requires many youth to accept full accountability for their actions. Something that we often say to youth is that you can't always control your external environment, but you can control your response to it. Youth are also asked how they might repair the harm. So sometimes that's in the form of an apology letter. In their apology letters, youth are asked to demonstrate accountability for their actions, as well as insight into how those actions impacted the other party. They can be written to the person most directly harmed or to another stakeholder, such as caregivers or law enforcement or school officials. The JCC reserves the right to review and request revisions if they feel the youth did not demonstrate accountability or the insight in their letter. Again, once the letter is sent to the harmed party, they are under no obligation to respond or to accept that apology. Sometimes we look for community service or acts of kindness. This serves not only to repair the harm, but also to show youth that positive actions have a ripple effect as well. Acts of kindness are typically reserved for younger youth around the age of 10. They are required to complete selfless acts for their caregivers, family members, schoolmates, etc. We've had youth who volunteer to show a new student around school, or who write cards for senior relatives in other states, or who help around the house. For older youth in community service, we've assigned youth to various sites throughout the region. We try to be meaningful in our community service requests, as we want youth to get something out of it, in the form of positively re-engaging with the community. So often when youth commit an offense, they feel very isolated from their community, and so we look to re-engage them so that they are actively involved and thus less likely to re-offend. We have actually had youth who have been hired following the completion of their volunteer work, and others who have changed their career paths as a result of their volunteer work. Also, we collect restitution if applicable. The referral source determines the restitution amount. So typically the police department or the court will let us know what we need to collect and from who. And then we collect them from the family and disperse that to the harmed party, and for record keeping purposes as well. So here we have a contract example from a young man who completed the program a few years ago. I have redacted a lot of the identifying information. So typically these contracts are much more detailed as far as who, what, when, where, why, and how. We like to give youth as clear directions as possible so they understand what's expected of them. But here we see that, the youth was asked to do an in-person apology to the harmed party. This was an agreement with the youth, the caregivers, the harmed party, and the JCC. The specific incident occurred at the harmed party's place of work. So the youth was asked to really talk to the harmed party about how they felt getting a call in the middle of the night and having to respond to their place of work, the impact that it had on them. We really wanted the harmed party to have the opportunity to be heard. Interestingly, the youth and the harmed party knew each other outside of this incident. And when I spoke to the harmed party on the phone afterwards, she was extremely grateful for this opportunity. It gave her a chance to be heard, to explain how it impacted her, but to also ask questions. Why did this happen? How did it happen? And it worked to repair that relationship. This youth also disclosed to the JCC that he was struggling with time management. In addition to school, he was involved in several extracurricular activities, and now had additional obligations created through the JCC program. So we asked that he work on some time management skills and create a detailed schedule where he laid out all of his obligations and priorities and due dates. The youth went above and beyond, went out and bought a whiteboard. Kept very detailed tracking of all of his obligations, took pictures every week, sent them in to us, really put a lot of time and effort into this component, and actually was able to improve his grades as a result of it. The youth was also required to complete community service at 2 events within his town. Again, all the kind of detailed information about those events was redacted, but one of them was actually at the location where the offense had occurred. So the youth was, asked to reach out to the harmed party to ask how he could help, to be there to help set up, to assist during the event, and to take down. And again, that really assisted in repairing the relationship between the two of them. And there was also an additional community service event beyond that. We did ask the youth to also do a one-on-one interview with law enforcement. And this really helped as far as providing a community lens to the ripple effect. So the youth was able to interview the state trooper who had initially responded to the offense the night that it occurred. So he asked the state trooper what precautions he had to take, what were some scenarios going through his mind as he was responding to the scene, what backup did he have to call for. We also asked him to discuss with the trooper what were some other calls that the trooper was unable to respond to because he was responding to this event. And again, that really highlights the community impact when these events occur. This youth did an amazing job in the program. I truly feel like he learned a lot, and I think he's going to go on to do amazing things. and he really excelled in completing his contract. So next, I just wanted to provide some visuals of the type of cases that we see. This data is just from January 2020 to current. But as you can see, we primarily see misdemeanor level offenses, 72%. We do see some violation and some felony level offenses as well. Of the violation offenses, we primarily see possession or use of tobacco products. We do also see a lot of personal possession of marijuana and quite a bit of unlawful possession of alcohol as well. Of the misdemeanor, we see a lot of criminal mischief, which includes vandalism. Close to that, we see simple assault. There has been a rise in kind of violent cases, typically youth on youth. And then we see a lot of theft as well. Beyond that, domestic violence, which is violence occurring within the home. I will say in light of COVID, we definitely saw an increase in that, where youth were physically acting out on caregivers or family members. We've seen possession of a deadly weapon, criminal threatening, resisting arrest, and criminal trespass. New Hampshire does have a lot of abandoned buildings. And many youth don't understand that even though it may be abandoned, ultimately somebody probably owns that property. So we have youth who are going into abandoned property, exploring, and sometimes will break a window. And that's where we also see the criminal mischief piece come into play as well. And then lastly, felony level cases. So typically we see primarily burglary. We do see conspiracy to commit burglary, which is often almost an accomplice to the burglary crime or offense. We do see also a lot of reckless conduct and robbery cases as well. So next we'll hear from Erika Greenwald. Ricky has been a volunteer with the program for about 5 years now. She brings with her a wealth of knowledge from her 25 plus years as an educator. Additionally, she is the chair for Keene Housing Kids Collaborative and has volunteered for many community agencies within the Monadnock region, many of which are focused on providing services and opportunities to our youth. Ricky, thank you again for not only agreeing to speak tonight to your experience as a committee member, but also for your continued support of the program.
Well, thank you so much, Demi. And by the way, you did an amazing job just summarizing everything. So I want to start by saying that it's an honor to serve on a JCC team. I really mean that. It's one of the most fulfilling things that I've done in a long time. I joined 5 years ago because I wanted to help youth based on all of my experiences teaching for over 20 years in the middle school age group. I'm also a mom, a grandmother. I know how hard it is to grow up, and we do make mistakes in life. And I just felt this was an opportunity for me to serve. So that's why I did it. So during the 5 years, there has been a substantial change, in my opinion, in the way the program is run. And when I started, it had a much different model to it. It was more like a panel. Personally, it seemed almost scary. I can't imagine what it must have felt like for the youth to sit there, but it was a little bit of a scary model, much less interaction, more of a mini court. Sometimes to me, it felt a little bit more punitive and not really what it was supposed to do. I think it was just the way it was structured back then. Everybody that served on it, we were all very warm, empathetic people, but I think it was just the structure of it. So I was so pleased when the shift occurred, and I've been witnessing the shift even changing more and more. For one thing, right from the beginning, we were not sitting across from a youth, but we started sitting in circles, which just made it so much more engaging and less frightening. Right away, we focused on more interaction. I feel that we've taken a much more holistic, caring view. We're not just looking at the issue, we are looking at the whole youth. We want to know what's going on in that person's life, aside from the issue at hand, because it's all one big puzzle and one big picture, and we want the youth to know that we care. And I think that's hard sometimes for the youth to think, well, you're strangers, why do you care? But we really do genuinely care about it. I know as an educator, I always wanted to ask questions, and I still do, about, how are things going on in school? What are the things you like to do? So I just know a little bit about the person besides just what brought you here. And I think it makes them feel more at ease when we do that. And I also do think it makes them see that we really do care. It's such a learning experience. It's a two-way learning experience. I especially like what we have done to structure, and Demi did a wonderful job to show you what a typical contract looks like. But I would just like to reiterate about that the apology letters, I think, are wonderful because they help the youth gain insight. It almost helps them figure out, what's going on. How did I harm somebody? It develops empathy. Okay, I think about how hard it must be to write an apology letter to a perfect stranger, because maybe you violated their space, by, for example, taking something off of their lawn or vandalism, and you have to write a letter. You have to write a letter maybe to a police officer for the time it took for that police officer. We ask them to write letters to all the harmed parties. That could be their parents. That's not easy. It's one thing to just say, I'm sorry, but when you have to write something that goes a little deeper, I'm sorry because I know this is how it affected you. And those are hard for youth to do. And I think one of the most heartwarming meetings that we've had is when a parent, will admit, I was so worried about you. You have no idea how much worry's been involved. And then for the youth to realize, my parents had to take time off from work to come to these meetings. My parents have to help make restitution, and then we'll figure out later on how to get the money. But they've got to do that. It's very, very stressful on the parents, of course, obviously on the youth, but to see the faces of the parents, it tugs at you. It really does tug at you. I also very much like the decision-making sheets that we have developed. It is a wonderful way for the youth to develop insights into choices. What were other choices that I could have made? And it's not easy to see those choices. And so it's wonderful. It's a very hard skill to develop, even in an adult, to be able to look at decisions and choices. So I feel that that's a wonderful asset that we have in the program. One of the biggest changes that Demi touched on in the way it's run now and before is that the youth is so involved in the process. It's not punitive. I don't feel it's punitive at all. I feel like it's just a way of helping in growth. I think the community service is wonderful. It has led to youth realizing, hey, I'm really good at something. I want to do this. And we help them design with their community services. So it's not just saying, go do 20 hours of this or that. We want it to be a meaningful experience. So I think that's been a wonderful piece of this, and everything else that Demi has talked about. I just want to end by saying that one of the things that's been so meaningful for me is when we come back after a few months, after the youth has had time to fulfill the contract, I see it's so heartwarming to see the growth that has taken place, even in those couple of short months. They're just so different, and they feel so proud of themselves that they've made it through this program successfully. I'm sure Bailey will talk about that, but I can see it on her face anyway. She's just excited to have been in the program. It's a learning experience on both ends. And I want to say that I always learn so much more about life from the interactions that we've had. I walk away always feeling so good, and not just because I help somebody. I feel so good that somebody's life has been changed for the better, and that person will go on. And I always say to them, think about when you're talking with your own children in 10, 15, or 20 years down the road, whatever, how will you relate this experience? What did you learn from this experience? And I think it's an incredibly heartwarming experience. And again, it's just been an honor to serve on it. Probably one of the most fulfilling things I've done. So thank you, Demi, for asking me to share my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Ricky. I really appreciate you being here tonight. Next, we will hear from Bailey, a youth who was referred to the program back in the fall of 2019. Bailey was asked to present tonight as she is a great example of why this program exists. A wonderful youth who made a mistake based on an impulsive decision, then chose to accept full responsibility for her actions and further put in the time and effort to learn from her decision. So I just want to take another opportunity for thanking her to participate tonight, for agreeing to participate tonight, excuse me, and for agreeing to share her story. So Bailey, whenever you're ready.
Okay, hi. So my name is Bailey, and I went through this program in the fall of 2019, so about 2 years ago now. And I just found the entire experience incredibly beneficial. With the help of Demitria and like her coworkers, it helped me make so much self-growth and progress. I had made a mistake, as a lot of people do, and unfortunately, it had a much larger impact than I had considered. But I was young and not smart, so I had to take accountability for my actions, and I'm really happy that I did. Especially through this program, it just helped me so much, and I feel like I've learned so much from it. So I had agreed to a contract in which I would write apology letters, and I created a vision board, which was actually really fun to do in the process too. I really liked that. And I did 20 hours of community service. And I also said I would bring up my grades, which was really good for me at the time. And once I was able to complete all of that, I just felt really good about myself. And I felt proud that I was able to like make it up, you know. And through my community service, I was actually given a job at the rec center. I worked there for 2 years, and now I know what I want to do, like with my future. And I'm going to Keene State actually next year in the fall, and now I know I want to work with children. And I got that from this program. If it hadn't been for this, I don't think I'd be in the place that I am today. I have grown so much as a person. I just feel like I have a much better head on my shoulders. I learned a lot about accountability and really how to accept my own faults and how to make up for it. And I just feel more like a grown-up, really. I'm really happy for everything that everyone was able to offer for me. And I really hope that more kids my age are able to go through this kind of thing, because it was incredibly beneficial. It really is more than just, you know, making up for what you had done wrong. It changed my life, really. Like, I feel like it helped me become the person I am today. And so that's why I was really excited to speak on behalf of it, because I just feel like it's such an amazing opportunity for anyone involved. I really think it's amazing. And I appreciate the time to speak on behalf of it too, just because I am really excited about it, and for more people to hear about it as well, because it had such a positive impact on my life.
Thank you, Bailey. Thank you again for being here tonight and for sharing. You know, and I just want to reiterate that you did an amazing job through the program. And it's been so wonderful for me having the opportunity to watch you grow outside of the program as well, and to hear you going to college. And, you know, I have no doubt that you'll go on to do amazing things.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, folks. So we're going to go ahead and get started with a Q&A. If you have a question for any of our panelists, or maybe all of our panelists, if you want to go ahead and put those in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll present those to the group as we move forward. Do you find that the harmed party is usually receptive to participating in the restorative justice process? And of course, other panelists, feel free to weigh in as well.
Sure. Not always, I will say, and certainly they're under no obligation to do so. We would love to have them participate. It really brings another level to the program and another perspective. But they don't have to, and there are situations where they don't feel comfortable doing so. I will say sometimes when restitution is involved, it kind of adds another layer of complexity to the case, and harm parties may not be willing to participate in light of that. When that happens, we try to be creative. And so sometimes we've had someone almost substitute in for the harm party. So if we know someone else who experienced a situation very similar, we'll ask them to provide an impact statement about how the situation impacted them, and then relay that to the youth. Or, sometimes we do have to be creative in identifying who maybe the harm party is. As I think Ricky touched base on, sometimes we look for parents or caregivers to talk about the impact on them. And often what we find is that youth really don't always consider the impact that it's had on their caregiver. So we spend a lot of time on that. And parents and caregivers will be very honest. I'm worried, is what we get a lot. I'm worried. What does this mean? What does this mean for his or her future? Getting that call, I'm scared. Is this no longer an isolated incident? Was this a one-time mistake, or is this them going down a dangerous path? And so we try to, if we can't get the person most directly harmed by the offense, we do try to be creative in getting somebody else's impact statement if possible and if appropriate.
Awesome. Okay. I have another one. It says, this sounds like such an incredible program. Thank you so much for this work and service for our community. I'm curious about how I, as a community member, can help support this work.
Yes, no, absolutely. I would encourage anyone interested to please reach out to me. I am the coordinator for the program. I can be reached through the City of Keene Youth Services. We have a Facebook page and also through the City of Keene website, and we're always looking to expand kind of our outreach and involve as many people and perspectives, around the table as we can. Again, as Ricky said, we try to be very holistic, and everyone brings their own perspective and their own lens to the table, and the collaboration is really what makes this program so great. And certainly anyone willing to be a part of it, more than welcome to reach out to me, and we can talk about it more.
Okay, so the next question is, it's actually for Bailey, and it's two parts. You may have already said, but how long were you in the program? Oh, I'm sorry, it's three parts. How long were you in the program? What were some of the things that were asked of you in the program? And the third part is, what was the most surprising for you going through this program?
Sure. So I was in the program for about 3 months. And during this time, I was asked to, let me think. Well, I had to do 20 hours of community service, and I had the opportunity to kind of choose what I wanted to do in that sense. I chose to go to the rec center because I enjoy working with children. And I was also asked to create a vision board, which was basically just outlining what I want my future to look like. And I found that beneficial as well to really see out in front of me. And I also wrote 2 apology letters, I believe. And I brought up all my grades. That was the last of it. Could you remind me what the final part of the question was?
Yes, was there any part, what part of the program surprised you?
I think going into it, I had thought it was going to be, how do I say this? I thought I was going to be in a lot of trouble, and I was going to be sitting down with a lot of people who were really angry at me, but it wasn't like that at all. It was made clear to me that what I had done was wrong and that I needed to own up to that and fix it. But I was expecting a lot of judgment and anger, and I did not get any of that, which is very good. I found that everyone I worked with was super kind, very not judgmental, and they really wanted to get to know me as a person. That honestly wasn't what I was expecting, because, I was scared and I was 16 and I thought it was just going to be a lot of angry adults, but it was a lot more than that. That's what surprised me the most. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a comment. It says, woohoo, Demi, Ricky, and Bailey. Thank you for sharing about this great program. And then another question, is there an age range that you normally see through this program? Also, how long do individuals usually stay in the program?
So we have started seeing, unfortunately, younger and younger participants in the program. The youngest we've seen is 10 years old, and that's where we really try to incorporate the acts of kindness versus community service. We also want to be mindful in choosing community service or acts of kindness of the obligation that this creates for caregivers as well. And we want to make sure that we're not, putting it on parents or caregivers to have to leave work or arrange transportation or, any sort of undue hardship on them. But yes, the youngest that we've seen is about 10, I would say. And up to 17 at the time of the offense. So we have had an 18-year-old come into the program, but the individual had just turned 18 and was 17 at the time of the offense. So the birthday had just occurred. So we were able to work with him in order to keep him out of court and out of having a record. Typically, pre-COVID, youth were in the program for about 3 months. This was because we, especially when community service or acts of kindness were involved, we wanted to give youth enough time to be able to complete that. Our goal is not to trip anyone up or put any obstacles in anyone's way. So, a lot of youth work outside of school, or again, we don't want parents to have to coordinate leaving work or missing income in order to take youth to commitments. So we try to give them enough time so that they're not choosing between, say, doing their schoolwork and completing the contract. So typically pre-COVID, when things were in person, it was about 3 months. In light of COVID, with the switch to virtual, I would say a lot of our contracts have been about 2 months because we've been very creative in what community service and acts of kindness looks like, because we also want to be, aware of safety for the youth and families. So a lot of that has been, helping family members around the house with yard work and things like that. So we have reduced the time slightly in light of that, but typically anywhere between 2 and 3 months. Sometimes if a youth has kind of several larger, maybe felony level charges that are pending, or maybe has a lot of things that they need to work on, we'll schedule a check-in in 2 or 3 months. And then from there, we may ask that they do a little bit more over the course of the next 2 or 3 months. A lot of times that initial 2 or 3 months is spent on skill building and insight. We don't just send a youth who is struggling with accountability straight to the apology phase, because they may not be there yet. So oftentimes we'll spend the beginning portion of the contract, whatever that looks like, working with them on building that skill and developing that skill to provide the insight and introspection. And then once we meet again and really assess where they're at, we may then, revise the contract to include a few more things once we feel they're able to handle that. Again, we're not looking to set anybody up for failure by any means. And so we meet youth where they're at in terms of skill building. And Ricky, certainly I welcome your feedback on that as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that one of the things that's so beautiful about the program is that we're like a team support system. It's not like we just meet with you and then send you off and say, see you in 3 months and you have to do this perfectly. We're touching base all the time. They call if they're having trouble understanding a part of it. We want them to succeed. Okay, as best, best of their ability, just to see the success. So that's beautiful about it.
Ricky, this question is actually for you. As someone has worked with the youth in the traditional criminal justice format and then through the transformation in the restorative justice, can you speak more about how the two compare and the differences you've noted in the interactions with the youth?
So, I take it back a few years ago. I felt like there was just a lot of the youth listening and we did more of the talking. And again, it was just because of the structure of it. Again, everybody that was on it was always, they're just great people. And I felt like it was more like, okay, you're going to go do this and then we'll see you in a few months and you just have to do this. And I felt like it was just, I didn't learn anything when I left. I didn't know any more about the youth when I left. I didn't know what made that child tick. I felt like I couldn't really participate in the way that I felt I could, that the skills that I had as an educator and to just help dig more deeply into that person. Now, first of all, just the way that we present when they come in, it's a very comforting looking circle. And again, I want to also say what Bailey said is we're very non-judgmental about it. We put them at ease. I believe in the first few minutes we put them at ease, and believe me, they come in and they're scared. I mean, as Bailey said, she thought she was going to come into a bunch of people that are just angry, and that's not the case at all. So, we try to put the youth at ease. And I feel like with this model also, there's a lot more back and forth dialogue and interaction. And I think that's very, very important. We're listening, we're really truly listening and asking prompting questions to try to have the youth really think about what happened and understand that we're there just to help this child grow. So again, I'm really still learning a lot about the restorative justice model. I think Demi did an incredible job outlining what it is, but it's just a different way of thinking also.
I have two questions, but I think I'm going to combine those two. So one person asked, how many kids do you see go through this program on a yearly basis? And the other question is, have you seen any youth come through the program multiple times?
We typically get roughly 30 kids a year, right around there, give or take a couple. Last year, I believe we had 33 for the year. Our program, there are multiple diversion programs throughout the state, and each one does things a little bit differently. Our program is a little bit different in that we accept multiple levels. So some other programs really limit their services to just misdemeanor level, but we also do violation and felony level. And we also accept repeat cases. It's very case by case. It's not guaranteed. I will say that statewide juvenile justice in New Hampshire is changing. And actually there is what's called a diversion informational summit occurring next week, where all of the different partners throughout the state, including diversion sites, attorneys, law enforcement, juvenile probation officers, are going to come together and really outline what that will look like. But the idea is that youth will be able to attend statewide, even if they are repeat offenders, for lack of a better term, because a lot of the data and science is showing that a lot of youth really grow out of some of these adolescent behaviors. They're not necessarily indicative of future criminal behavior. So they would like to provide youth with the opportunity to return, if appropriate, statewide, kind of uniformly and consistently.
Is this program, does it seem to work for all of the youth that come through the program? Do they actually finish the program, or is this actually applicable to all youth?
We like to say that it's very case by case. There are some youth that really struggle with the accountability piece, and we really try as hard as we can to work with youth on that. They're always encouraged to take a day or two to really think about it. We're always very clear with them about kind of the necessity for that component, and the fact that it really limits our work with them through the program if they can't accept accountability. We do, we have some youth that don't complete the program. It's not for everyone. Unfortunately, there are some youth that for one reason or another choose not to cooperate. We have unfortunately seen a rise in parents who aren't responding. And unfortunately, if the parents aren't in agreement, we can't really work with the youth. So that's, we've been seeing a little bit more of that lately. It could just be, due to COVID and kind of the chaos that's created. It might just be more than the parents or caregivers can take on at this time. But unfortunately, if they're not willing to work with us, it really limits our ability to do anything with the youth involved. The majority of youth, I will say, participate. Not everybody is gung-ho initially, but usually, we work really hard. We try to be really aware of where youth are at. We don't want to set anyone up for failure. And so I will say, for the most part, youth do graduate or complete the program, and then they don't go to court or have a charge as a result of that. Ricky, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Well, I just want to say also that, I'm looking at Bailey as like a kind of a model.
She is.
Of somebody that really decided to just not do the program and check the boxes for everything that has to be done, but she used it as an opportunity for growth and introspection. And now look at her, she now knows what she wants to study in school and what it's a lifelong learning thing that happened for her. So sometimes, you know, when we're doing the follow-ups 2 to 3 months later, the youth, yes, has fulfilled all of the obligation, but we know that there, you know, there could be more growth, but also that's just because of the maturity levels too of some of these, and also a great deal of it depends also on the support they get from parents or caregivers, or you know, and that could be a mom, a dad, a grandmother, an aunt, an uncle, whoever it is. And as Demi said, you know, it really depends. It's like it becomes like a whole team process, and so we don't always see the level of success that we'd like, that we see with this beautiful young lady.
Yes, absolutely. So before I ask the last question, you are, Bailey, you are amongst a number of alum. You are, a lot of folks from the KSC community are on the webinar, and curious minds want to know, what are you studying in the fall?
I decided that this year I'm going to go into Claire just so I can kind of see everything before I make a 100% decision. But my plan is to do social work, I'm thinking.
Wonderful. Oh, that's great. Hope to see
I've
you.
already been trying to recruit her as my intern.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, that's great.
Awesome.
Okay, last question of the night. How long after going through the program do you follow up with the youth?
So I think when Ricky was referring to follow-up, that was kind of the review session, and I don't think we necessarily really talked about that or touched base on it. But so after we work together collaboratively to create a contract, we'll come together at the end of that contract period, whatever that looks like, to review progress, to talk about what the youth has learned, what they'll do differently. We don't do any sort of formal follow-up necessarily outside of that. I often see youth out in the community. And, you know, I've always said to them as we wrap up that certainly, you know, due to confidentiality, I won't necessarily initiate a conversation with them, but they're always welcome to talk to me. And I will say for the most part, they really do. It's been great. Pre-COVID, I would go into the schools a lot if there was a youth I was having a hard time getting a hold of. And very often in the halls, I would get stopped by someone, and they're usually so excited to talk about what they've been doing since the program and how things are going. So there isn't necessarily a formal follow-up. We do send a survey to youth and parents, but outside of that, they aren't necessarily required to communicate with us. But certainly, you know, it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen in kind of an informal capacity.
One last comment before we say good evening. Lauren says that you're going to love Keene State, Bailey. We're all excited that you're coming to campus. So thank you so much, Bailey and Demitria and Ricky, for giving your time this evening to giving us an overview and just really a personal face and giving life to this process. So we wish you all a good night and enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.